Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to do an AR-15 trigger replacement. So even though this is a 9mm rifle, this is a Palmetto PX9, it takes a standard AR-15 mil-spec trigger group. And last week I did a review on AOG defense triggers, right? And basically nothing special, they're just good triggers. I buy these on Optics Planet. They're somewhere between $60 and $80. I just get the regular ones. I don't get the polished ones. So I know that there's like more refined triggers out there. Triggers that have like lighter, trigger breaks. For my use, right? I use these guns basically to train new shooters. They're shooting at fairly close distances, usually inside of 30 yards. I just need triggers that will just work, that will put thousands of rounds downrange. So usually just a standard mil-spec trigger group is fine. I bought this gun I think last fall. I have like 3 of these Palmettos. I have not been using this the whole time. I've been kind of using it on and off. At one point I was favoring 2 other guns. Lately I've been I've been favoring using this one a lot because it has that 10-inch barrel. And what I've been finding is that the 10-inch barrel is kind of great because women can shoot it and it's long enough that a lot of guys can hold it, without, and there's just enough space over here. So lately I've been using this a lot. I can't tell you exactly how many rounds it took to wear out this trigger group. I would say it's more than 5,000, probably less than 10,000. Now, how do I know that this trigger group is worn out? Well, it started, I think, like last week, right after I did that review on this AOG trigger. I think maybe a day or 2 later, I was at a different range. I was training people, and the trigger seized up. So basically, people were shooting bang, 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 and then all of a sudden they tell me that the gun's not working. Okay, so basically the gun was dead. Even if I racked it, the trigger was dead. I could get it to work by switching it from the fire position to the safety position. That would dislodge it. At first I said, you know what, maybe the gun's just dirty. So basically I opened it up, cleaned it, and then I started shooting. I just started using it through the normal course of my training. Basically it was working fine. At some point, I would say within 400 rounds, I had that same problem where the trigger group seized up again. So the trigger's working, except like every 400 rounds or so, it seizes up. So, it's starting to go. Given that this is a gun that I use very regularly, it makes sense to just throw in a new trigger rather than have it interrupt my training session. Okay, so we're going to take this gun apart. As you can see, this gun is pretty clean because I just cleaned it a few days ago. All right, so I know that cleaning it is not an issue. Now, usually when these triggers get really go, just by holding it down and just continually test firing it, I'm able to test it and see if it's not working, right? So I'm doing this function test, and I did this a lot with this. I could not get it to seize up, by testing it like this. I couldn't get it to seize up. But it's happened to me twice while people were shooting that the trigger seized up. So, and even after I cleaned it, it seized up. So I know it's just, I'm just going to change the trigger out because this is a gun that I use a lot. And the reason why I'm doing, I wouldn't have even thought to record this video, but one of my viewers requested it. He said, hey, he asked me, how do you change the trigger group? And I said, well, next time, actually he asked me next time I'm changing a trigger to throw up a video. And sure, absolutely, why not? So let's get these pieces out. Let's see what we got here. This is interesting. Alright, so this is our hammer. This is our trigger. Alright, hammer. Actually, this is the hammer. That's the hammer spring. And I can see that they gave us 2 separate hammer springs. That's interesting. I guess a heavy one and a light one. Okay, this is the heavier one. This is a lighter one. So this is, I guess, for like a 22 or something. I'm just going to test this out. So that's interesting. AOG gives you, on this one anyway, they gave you a second hammer spring. And one of the things that you really got to be careful with is when you put the hammer springs in, you got to make sure you don't put them in backwards, because that's going to get this thing to jam up. And I got to tell you guys, I can almost never remember how this thing's supposed to go. In fact, let's take a look at the existing one. You kind of get a clue. Okay, so it's got to look like that. Okay, great. So that's the easiest way to figure out which way this is supposed to go in. Alright, so that's fitted in. There you go. Alright, so that's going to go like that. Alright, so let me see, do I have it in the right place? Yep, matches up the old one. Okay, so I know I got this facing in the right direction, right? You can see how that is like that. Because if you put the spring in backwards, it's not gonna hit it hard enough, and it's not gonna work right. Okay, so that's the hammer. Okay, so it's interesting that they give you a lighter hammer spring. Okay, by the way, these hammer springs do break, so I do have extra like standalone hammer springs. So that's another component that breaks on these trigger groups. And this is my trigger group. That's the trigger itself. And then over here you can see that's the disconnector. That's the thing that basically, if you're holding the hammer, the trigger down, this little thing over here is what catches up here, right, and prevents this from you firing the gun until the bolt has fully closed. So it basically also keeps it from going full auto, right? So that's the disconnector. That's where the disconnector, this piece, catches onto this piece. All right, so basically once you let it go, the way it works is this piece over here catches to that piece right there. So that's where it normally sits. That's your sear right there. All right, so there's two connecting points here. That's your normal sear down here, and that's the point up here where this thing catches this, where if you're holding the trigger down, it's going to catch there. And then if you release the trigger, it'll let it go, and then it'll fall onto this sear. And then when you press the trigger, right, you press the trigger, it rolls down, and then it releases this, and it goes forward. So that's how that works. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to remove my hammer pin, right? So you got your hammer pin there, and the trigger pin over here. On my other 9mm rifles, the hammer pin was something that was breaking quite regularly, so I put in the stainless steel replacements. On this one over here, for whatever reason, they haven't been breaking, so this gun just vibrates differently. It's got a longer barrel, whatever. There's all sorts of variables on why on one gun that's exactly the same, the other one's a Palmetto PX9, on why that gun I was breaking the hammer pins, on why on this one I'm not. I have no idea. So I'm just going to take this, I'm just going to push this in. There you go, and then just hold the hammer down a little bit, and then your pin comes right out. Normally I'll push it in going the other way because I got this button here, but anyway, I'm not going to bother pushing it back. I'm just going to push this all the way through. Get that out. So there's my hammer pin right there. I'll put that in that dish right there. There you go. And there's my old hammer. Okay. And obviously that spring looks good. I'm gonna hold on to this because, like I said, it was only jamming up like once every 400 rounds. So I'm not gonna throw it out. I'm just gonna put it in a little baggie, a little Ziploc baggie, and I'm gonna mark it used. Okay, used, not so good, or something like that. Okay. So now I want to get out my trigger pin. So again, I'm just gonna take this little punch, and I'm gonna punch that out, and it usually comes out pretty easy. By the way, the thing that keeps this thing from sliding out is the spring itself, the way it rests on the pins. I'll show you guys in a second. Let me get this out all the way. Whoops, there it goes. There. That's the disconnect. So the way these legs over here basically sit on the pins over here keeps those pins from sliding out, right? Because you'll see on the hammer and on the trigger pins, you see these little indents over here. Well, that's where this spring sits. Right, so that spring sits on those things, and that's what keeps this thing from sliding left, right. Okay, so that's how that's supposed to work. Sometimes it doesn't, and people have to get like anti-roll pins and stuff like that. So, all right, so here's the trick, right? Technically, the way you're supposed to get this trigger out is you're supposed to remove the safety selector, right? But to get the safety selector out, it's a pain in the ass in the sense that you have to basically remove your grip over here. All right, so basically you take this off. There's a long Allen key you put in there. You pull this out, and then there's like little springs in there for your safety selector. You gotta be careful not to lose those. But if you angle this just right, you can usually get the trigger out without having to remove your safety selector. So that's what we're gonna do now. I'm just gonna try and get this out because I really don't want to have to remove the safety selector. Let me rotate this to the safe position. Let me see if that gives me a little bit more room. There we go. So by moving that to the safe position, I was able to get my trigger out. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the disconnector back in there, right? So that's the disconnector. Okay. There's a little spring in there, and basically that little notch right there that lines up with that spring. I'm going to put that in there like that, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold that down. And I'm going to take my pin and I'm just going to push that in. Just to kind of put this back together. All right, so I've got my trigger and this connector together. This way I'm going to put that in a little baggie like I said. And then over here I've got my old hammer. And here we go. This is the old pin. I'm just going to run that through it so I don't lose that. Okay, good. Because like I said, I'm going to save these two parts because it's not like they weren't working. I mean, they were good for about 400 rounds. So you know, that's still something I want to hold on to. Okay, so so that's out. This is, like I said, this is pretty clean over here because I just cleaned this last week. I was hoping that the cleaning itself might fix this. All right, and now what I'm going to do is let's get that trigger back in there. All right, so let's pull out the pin. By the way, I generally don't advise you do this outdoors because it's really easy to lose parts if you're doing this outdoors. I've got lots of extra parts in case I do lose any parts, but usually, if it's something, if I'm kind of doing something for the first time, not so sure, I do it like in my kitchen, my shop kitchen or something, right? It's someplace where I know if I drop stuff on the floor, I'm going to find it, because if I drop anything on the ground here, I'm not finding it. All right, so let's get this. Actually, I'm just going to take this off completely. I'm going to take the disconnector out, and I'm just going to put the trigger in. So again, it's just a matter. Let's get this back in the safe position because it seemed like it was able to come out easier. So let's do this in reverse now. There you go, we got that in. There you go, it went underneath the safety bar. I'll flip that to that position over there. So great, so that's now in position. Okay, so now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the disconnector, the new disconnector, this piece over here, and I'm just going to seat it. Let me see if I can get you guys a little bit closer. Angle this camera just down a little bit more. Hopefully you guys can see it. Actually, I'll get behind the camera, make sure. Yeah, it looks right. So we got that piece in. I'm going to take this connector now, and I'm going to put that in. Match it up to that spring. Good, that's in its place now. There you go. So you just kind of hold it down with your finger, and then I'm going to take the new pin, and while I'm holding this down with my finger, I'm just going to run this through the hole. And sometimes you got to wiggle a little bit to match, get that disconnector to line up right. And there we go. All right, so now my trigger's in. Okay, out of the way. Okay, safety selected, rotates fine. So here's the thing now, this is in there, but if you just push on your pin, it'll just move right out because there's nothing holding it in place until the hammer spring gets in there. Okay. So now this is the hard part. This is the real pain in the ass because the hammer spring is obviously under a lot of tension. So let's see. So that's got to go like that. So getting the hammer spring in is usually a pain in the ass. So basically I got to line up the legs. Those two legs are going to sit on either side of your trigger. There's a little space over there for these legs to sit, right? So if you look at it, there's like a little space in there, right? Legs sit right on top of that. All right. Oh, hold on. I forgot to take the pin out. Let's get the pin out, so otherwise it's not going to go in there. There you go. Okay, so the pin is out. Yeah, almost out. Alright, let's push it through the little Allen key. Get the sucker out of there. Try not to go too hard because I don't want this thing to go flying. This thing is not very cooperative right now. Yep. All right. Well, luckily it went flying into my face, so I didn't lose it. Because if it had gone flying someplace over there, I would have lost it. So my face prevented me from losing this. All right, good. So the pin's out. Like I said, if you want to do this indoors, don't do this outdoors. I'm just doing this outdoors because it's easier to film out here. All right, so I'm going to put that in. So here's the hard part, right? This is the hardest part about changing out your trigger. Let me lift the camera up a little bit. All right, so I'm going to basically push this in with my thumb and fold it back and push this forward, right? Because this thing's under tension now. So I'm going to fold this down, push this forward, match up my holes. There we go, I got the holes matched up. Now what I'm going to do is, rather than try to put the pin in there, I'm just going to take this Allen key and I'm just going to stick that in there as a placeholder. All right, great. So now I got my Allen key going through that, you know, going through the hammer, going through the hammer, holding it in place. I mean, technically this will work now, right? See, if I hold the trigger, this connector works. Okay, so this actually works. So now that I've got this Allen key in there as a placeholder, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this pin and I'm going to kind of push this through. So I'm pulling my out. So as I pull out my Allen key, I'm pushing this pin in. All right, so that's the secret to this. As you move the Allen key out, you come in with the pin and you just slide them in and out. And again, I should have really did that from the other side because this thing has the magazine release on this side. I keep forgetting that. So that's in. It's actually halfway in. There we go. All right, so basically the Allen key came out. So now it's just a matter of matching this up and pushing this through all the way. Make sure this camera's on. Move you here. Just got to put the Allen key in there. Just kind of wiggle this a little bit into place. Okay, usually if I could push the hammer down. Oh, there you go. If you push on the hammer here, you'll get this to move a little bit. And you can push it all the way through. There it goes. Got it through. There you go. That's it. That's it. That's your AR-15. So you can manually just do a function test, right? Because pull the hammer back with your thumb, and then release it into your thumb, you know, slowly, right? You don't want to basically be slamming this into the receiver or into your, I mean, it shouldn't hit the receiver anyway, but it will hit your, what do you call this, the bolt catch over here. So basically just, okay, do a function test like that. And then what you can do is test your disconnector. The way you're going to do that is pull this down, squeeze the trigger, hold it down, and then let go, right? You see how it just went down to the disconnector? And now that's the main sear, okay? So when you hold the trigger down, that's your disconnector, right? That's your backup sear, basically, right? Then you release, it falls onto your primary sear, and then when you press it, it releases the hammer. Right, so those are the two ways that you're going to test your trigger. Right, you're going to test it by just holding it down and releasing it. And also by holding it down, holding the trigger down, then releasing it, having it fall on the disconnector, pressing it. Right, and that's it. And that's just ALG mil-spec trigger group. I think it's like $60. I said in the last, when I did a review of this, I said that every time I replace one of these, I order 2 more. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to go to Optics Planet. I'm going to place an order for 2 more of these, just have them back up, even though I probably have like 6 or 7 of them at this point. But this is a consumable item, okay? AR-15 triggers have rated for like a 5,000 round life. I usually get closer to 10,000 rounds. But yeah, it's something that is going to wear out. Right? People typically think about changing out their, getting extra bolts, bolt parts, bolt carrier replacements, right? But they don't think about getting a replacement trigger group, because that is something that is going to wear out. I got, there you go, function test, that's working great. I had one AR that I actually ran it its full length. That one went 21,000 rounds, and 21,000 rounds I completely basically ran out the rifling on the barrel. That was replaced by Radical Firearms under warranty. So over those 21,000 rounds, I had to replace the trigger group on that 3 times. Okay, so you can expect you're going to need 3 of these trigger groups over the life of your AR. And you're probably going to need at least one, you're going to need, I recommend having at least one replacement bolt carrier and parts. Now, I never killed the whole bolt, but I had to replace gas rings on it. I had to replace extractors on it. I had to replace a firing pin on it. So these are consumable items. These ARs are designed to be light guns. They're not designed to be like heavy duty, never break type of guns. Okay, so these are guns that you can expect they're gonna break as you use them. As you use them. They're consumable. So especially the 9mm. With 9mm, I mean, typically with 9mm we do a lot more shooting. Okay, I will typically like right now when I'm training people, I'm traveling around. I mean, one of these guys can do like 1,000 rounds in a week. I mean, that's pretty standard for these PX9s. Now the interesting thing I'm looking forward to seeing, the AR-15 that went 21,000 rounds before the rifling, before I ran out the rifling on that gun. I'm interested now. Obviously, with the PX9s, doing sometimes 1,000 rounds a week, I'm going to get, within 2 years, right? I'm going to already be up to like 20,000 rounds on this gun. I'm curious to see what the life of this barrel will be. I expect it will be a lot longer. I would expect that this barrel, again, I'm just speculating, I don't know. I expect that it's closer to like a 40 to 50,000 round life. The reason, maybe even more, maybe 60,000, 70,000. The reason is because the bullets going down this barrel are going a lot slower, right? The 9mm is going at something like 1,200 feet per second, whereas 5.56 is going at like 3,000 plus feet per second. So because the 223 in your ARs is going so much faster, it gets a lot hotter. And usually with AR-15s, you shoot like 2 or 3 magazines and your rail is hot, right? You get to the 4th magazine, this rail over here is pretty hot. With the 9mm, because the bullets themselves are going a little bit slower, I can easily go through 100 rounds, and then the barrel, the rail is not that hot. Okay, and that has to do with the bullets simply traveling slower down the barrel, and heat is the thing that basically shortens your barrel life faster. Okay, so it'll be interesting to see how these 9mm rifles go. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Post some comments. If you're not a member of the channel, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys soon.